Hi, I'm Rebecca, and I'm a weaver and I'm a fiber artist. And sometimes I think maybe I'm even an artist. And then I meet someone like the woman I met today, Ixchel Suarez, who really truly is an artist. I think it's in her DNA. It exudes from every pore of her body. She's amazing. I can't wait to show you her space. Now, she's a tapestry artist, so she is a weaver. It's just a little different. And oh my goodness, it's so interesting. I was so inspired by her as well as her space. Let's go take a look at it now. So, entering Ixchel's studio, first we walk through her gallery, which is incredible. So this is the way in, and she's showing another artist's work here. I will get that information for you. And in we go to the studio.
Welcome everybody to my studio and also to the Canadian Tapestry and Texture Center. My name is Ixchel Suarez. I come from Mexico and we are here in Warkworth. I've been in Canada for almost 20 years already, and I've been doing this journey of tapestry weaving among other textile mediums and techniques for almost 40 years. So I guess I'm stuck with it. I guess that's my life. And I would be so happy for you to get a little bit of a immersion into my place, my heaven where I do my life basically, and it will be great for you to see. I'm going to show you a little bit of my work and what I do throughout these years. I'm also an art instructor because I need to pay the bills. So I do tapestry and I love using a lot of different materials. I am very experimental. I wouldn't consider myself very orthodox weaver, like only using natural fibers, cotton, wool, silk, or linen. I use plastic, I use paper, raffia, I use bamboo fiber. I even tried using Coca-Cola fiber, which we'll talk about that later. But yes, I like exploring different materials and different sensorial approaches. I think part of what I do, I work with photography, and I like interpreting the photograph of nature. That's my process. I started doing tapestry, like I said, many years ago, and I was doing scuba diving when I was younger, way much younger, and I come from a family of musicians. So my tapestries were basically inspired in musical movements and the beauty of the sea. And I started putting shells and different materials and almost kind of doing coral reefs and having a family of, my grandfather was an archaeologist, and I grew up with all of these beautiful books of the Mayan culture. I was also portraying Mayan motifs, like my name, Ixchel, which is Mayan. And throughout the years, we grow up, we get married, we have kids or not, but life takes us elsewhere. Coming to Canada, I started more into the nature and climate change and what is it about time. And for me, the reference of time is very important, especially with the reference of nature and photography. And that's what I was looking at this one. If you see this tapestry, which is just a little bit because I have to hang it, this relates to a photograph I took from some leaves fallen in the middle of the forest. And when you take a picture, it's just a sudden moment of emotion when you take the shutter speed of your cell phone or your camera. But then you have to interpret it with, in my case, with yarns. If you're a painter, if you're a graphic artist, you would do it with other materials, right? So when you see an emotional thing that draws your attention, you take a picture. And it's just very few seconds or fragments of a second. But then you relate, in my case, in a warp and weft through tapestry. And tapestry is very slow, and still you have to continue with that emotion. And then you put together all the different materials, and that's the richness of the it's like a feast going through your eyes, not only touching the fibers, but also putting them in a warp and weft. And that's what I've been fascinated for so many years. So I also explore working with different mediums and different formats. You see, I'm never the same. I collect objects and I try to incorporate them in a way. This is called the circle of life, and it relates to, of course, time and how nature will be transforming itself the way we do. This is the way part of my yarns are, not all of them, because I have these bins where I put all the different yarns with different textures, and the way when I open them, they tell me what to do. I have a lot of photographs that I want to interpret, and sometimes I have 2 or 3 projects on the go. One would be like very, very detailed, and the other would be a little bit more loose. So when I don't want to be too stressed dealing with gradation of color or mixing materials, I just want to spend some time weaving in a nice evening looking at the sunset, then I will have a tapestry on the go that will have very simple going back and forth plain materials. So that's the way I work. And here I have them by colors, not precisely the color that you see here, but I like working with, for example, these ones. You see, I have different materials that could be cotton or wool or linen, and I like to mix them. For example, this is part of silk with merino, and I love the shiny part of the material. So I like playing around with materials, basically. Okay, so right now we are in the other side of the studio. This is where I work in my larger projects. I like looking at the loom because I use a lot of textures. I really enjoy seeing as it grows, not so much in the roller or the beams of my looms, which I also did like for many years. But this time I want to see all my projects as I go along. And as I was mentioning, I don't use one project only. I work on several. So this was one diptych. That's one work that I'm working on, related to a birch tree. I don't know if it has a lot of shine there, but it's a detail of a photograph of a birch tree, but not so much. I don't want to portray the birch tree. I want to have the emotion of the photograph and what it gives me. And this is a series of the pandemic, unfortunately. I am processing all of these things that have happened, and I'm sure a lot of you have had other stories and experiences. In my family, there were several losses. So the empty spaces are representing death, basically, but not in a way. Coming from Mexico, death is not the end. We celebrate death in a different way as other cultures. So I can tell you that my process through Tapestry has been to understand this passage of time and how we evolve. So I can show you here on this part the way I work. I use photography, like a detail of something that catches my attention, and then I process that with different materials, and then I come up with my woven pieces. Now they can be 2D or 3-dimensional. Here you see I build my looms. I really like to work on spaces where I can make them. Now it's interesting because when I posted things online, people tell me, oh, so the design is important. Honestly, it has nothing to do. I'm going to tell you a little secret, because the way that I put the nails is just because if you put it all in a straight line and then you put the pressure of the warp, it will break it, you know? So it has happened several times when I was already halfway through, and then suddenly the warp, the wooden part would break, and that's not good, especially when you're halfway through the tapestry. So that's why I distribute the tension. Now you can put it in a triangles and waves and squares, it doesn't matter, as long as that you keep the separation of the warp. Now, this is very convenient for me because if you see the EPIs, or ends per inch, like we say in weaving, the separation of the warp, if I want a closer warp, I would put 2 strings in each one of the nails. If I want to work with a thicker material, I would jump every other nail, and then I would be spreading out the separation of the EPIs, and that for me has worked very, very well. And this also allows me to do larger projects, because this beam, I can put it higher, and I can work on a stand, and I can go high as I want, and I can go the length of the wall if I want. So that's very convenient to see all at once. Now, when I'm teaching, I have been a teacher for a long time. I start with the basic, which is the flat weave, something like this, where you get to do in a small sample color composition. You do gradation of color. I do natural dyes, and the edges that have to be straight or not. And then once you pass this exercise that I call the woven notebooks, this would be the first exercise. The second one would be exploring texture. So I teach different ways of using different materials to come out of the loom. This is one of the workshops that it's very popular. The history of the Lady and the Unicorn and the Mille Fleurs tapestries. So in the 15th century, from 13th to 15th century, there was a style of tapestries that had to do with the background full of flowers. That's why it's called generally the Mille Fleurs. So this workshop explores understanding the symbolism of each one of the flowers. So you come and then you choose one of the flowers, and then you get to weave. It's a 3-day workshop for intermediate to advanced weavers. And you do samples like this with one of your chosen flower. And in the meantime, we listen to medieval music, which I love. I used to play in an early music group. I played the flutes. And it's a beautiful exploration history. And also you see the background of how the big studios or the workshops would be working at that time. Who were the weavers? Who were the dyers? Who were the artists that would be doing the cartoons for the tapestries and so on. So it's a very nice way of connecting with people and learning a little bit about history. So one of the things that I'm really interested is, of course, I'm a traditional weaver. I was trained traditional. I studied in Poland with 2 of the greatest teachers. And I like exploring because I'm from Mexico, I'm a little bit more expressive. You can see my colors, and the way we work with textures. So if you see this, I don't know how close I can get, but you can see here I use all sorts of material. This is exploration of a 3D. It has photograph printed onto fleece, and it's a regular warp, you see, and I'm working with even Brillo pad from the kitchen, like scrubbers from the kitchen. You can see it here. I like the contrast of a subtle silk, like the yellow, with raffia, and then putting something rough. I think it's like it's having a conversation, when you're modulating your voice. It's not only flat. I have nothing against flat weaving. I love it, but this is more me. This resonates more to me. And also the fact that I can play with 3D. You see, if I'm going to take this for you to see. I'm working with metallic warp, and if you see, I can bend it, I can move it, and it's malleable. And that's how I started doing jewelry. Believe it or not, I worked with metal warps, and then I thought, wow, this is so cool. And bracelets or chokers are. Okay, so now we're almost going around the studio, and I'm still happy that you're still there with us. So this is where I teach online, because I have groups. I belong to 3 of the major groups of the British Tapestry group and groups from US and all my friends that have studios in Poland where I studied. So we still connect, and this thing about pandemic showed us that we can now do more things connecting with each other. And I teach art online. So this is where I sit. This is where I would be giving my classes, even weaving, demonstrations or master classes, or also advice for portfolios or something that, for textile or design. And this is where I just got all my sample of colors. And if you see, I love mixing, from the shiny one to the matte, to the rough, to the big one. And believe it or not, because a lot of tapestry weavers ask me, I use the thread that is for like a sewing thread to do blends. And very, very fine wool and cotton. I use all of those. And just, I wanted to mention that I'm not a spinner, but I love spinning wheels. I love the wood. I love the touch of the wood. And this is an late 1800 spinning wheel. And even though I've tried to do spinning, trust me, it's not my thing. I love the way the spinners, it's almost like connecting to this Zen moment. But I'm not a spinner. I'm sorry for all those spinners that are out there. So one of the beauties of this center is that we are the host of one of the most amazing inheritance that we got from this master weaver and Order of Canada, Tamara Jaworska. She was just an amazing, amazing artist. She came from Poland, and she had this loom. It was brought from Poland, from the makers of the original tapestry looms. It's not completely haute lisse, it would be vertical, or basse lisse, completely horizontal. So it's a little inclined. It's like custom made. It's beautiful. And in that loom, which is 100-inch wide, this is her name, Tamara Jaworska, and she did over 100 tapestries in this loom. So we are very honored to have her tool, her artifact, her beautiful piece of, it's almost like playing a violin, sitting in front of that loom. And even though she passed, she really wanted us to be taking care of this fantastic loom. So one of the things that I love about tapestry is the versatility of using different materials. It's very painterly, and like I said, the point is not to copy, because you can copy anything, but to give your expression through this kind of medium, right? We have to explore what is the emotion that you want to portray. And the nice thing about having this diversity of materials, here you can see like very shiny. I use metallic thread, very, very fine. And then I use this little bumps of a sumac with different techniques. And I love doing lines with a fine sumac. And I use different techniques. I love blending colors, as you can see here. I love doing transitions of color, and I work with a lot of natural dyes. So this one has, of course, marigold. It has a little bit of cochineal. It has a little bit of indigo dye, and also synthetic yarns. Now, I don't usually frame the tapestries. I don't believe that tapestries should be framed, but some clients they still have the concept of a painting. So I started adding a woven frame. So sometimes I have it in black. And it also depends on the commission of a tapestry and where is it going. If I'm going to be doing an artwork for a foyer or for an office or for a building, it will depend on where you're going to be putting it and what is the like or needs of the clients also. The way I work is usually I work like 6 to 8 EPIs, like the separation of my warp, because I know more or less already how many yarns I use, what's the type of yarns that I use. But let's say if I have a little bit that I need to put more detail, I would add more warps on top. So that's another thing that I can do. I'm always adding lines or taking off lines of warp. So it's just playing around, So I hope you get interested in tapestry. There's so much to do with this medium. And it goes into a very fine line about art and craft, but I would let you explore it on your own because it's a fascinating technique and a fascinating medium to communicate. This is a Mayan profile, and I went to an exhibition of Norval Morisot. And I thought the Aboriginals are, like the same here and there. So this is called Aboriginals from Here and There. And this is the clash of cultures, the Mexican and the Canadian, And it became like a whirlwind of cultures. The splash and the Mayan numerals and another Mayan numerals. And then this is the iconic figure of Norval Morisot with a flow. And of course the colors are super, super intense. And then after that, I did another tapestry inspired in a birch tree in the snow. And I thought I was betraying my culture. I completely felt like, where are my Mayans? Where is my essence of Mexico? And then I put inside the birch tree little pieces of faces inside. So that one was the turning point for me. Was my turning point because it's called Beneath My Skin, and it has my first layer is Mexican underneath my new coat of Canadian embracing nature, which is the birch tree. So that was the tapestry, the second one I did in Canada, and I keep it very close to me because it's my whole story arriving in Canada from another culture.
Tell me a little bit about what inspired you to start weaving.
Mm-hmm. So what inspired me to start weaving was I used to do crochet and knitting with my dad. My dad, he was a violinist, and he would do his warmers with his needles, and we would just be doing things, and then with my grandmother doing crochet. And I found that took me to do, I wanted to be a designer, and I started working with fabrics. Working with fabrics, like doing clothing, I really enjoyed doing patterns, transforming the pattern and putting it this. And then the way, when you stretch the fabric, it's interesting when you pull one side or you pull the other, it moves in different ways. And I thought that was interesting. So a couple of years after I was doing clothing, I was probably 12 or 13, my best friend told me that there was a course in loom weaving. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. Let's do it. And it was a summer. It was 2 months of weaving. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. But I was learning to do rugs. And I didn't want anybody to be stepping on them because I thought it's so much work to set the loom and stepping on it. And that's when I thought there has to be something better just to hang it. And then after that summer, I went back to Mexico, and there was in the Museum of Modern Art this humongous exhibition of contemporary Polish art with Magdalena Bakanowicz, basically, and all the contemporaries of the avant-garde of contemporary textiles. That was the turning point. That's how I started. I didn't want to do anything else except that. That was my call.
Tell me about that.
That exhibition was from artists from Poland after the war, when they didn't have any materials, and they started exploring natural fibers, but in a way that it wasn't the traditional. The Gobelin and the traditional tapestries from 500 years ago in Europe, they served the purpose that was basically to cover the walls of the castles. And what the Polish artists were trying to say was, get out of the wall, come three-dimensional, and then you can walk around, and then try all you can with the materials you have available after the war. And that's, sometimes the struggles in history and in a society, when you have the less or you have restrictions, you have to find an outlet. And that's what they did, and they became the avant-garde of the contemporary textiles.
So you have moved your studio. You want to talk a little bit about when you started
the Tapestry Center?
Yeah.
Or here in Canada?
Either. either one.
Yes. Okay, so I came back from Poland because I was studying in Poland. After this exhibition, I applied for a scholarship and I came back and I opened a studio. That was in Mexico, and then life took me elsewhere. I ended up living in Spain again, going back to Mexico, and then we came to Canada. In Canada, I thought I needed to do something related to my field. And I started teaching, to my kids. At that time, they were little. And I found out that there was the World of Threads Festival in Oakville. And it blew my mind because I thought, wow, here in Canada, there's this festival of threads. And I knew there was some more interest in Canada. I was living in Oakville. And I opened a small studio that till now, it's been 13 years. And 6 years ago, like almost 7 years ago, I decided to not only do the art studio, but to separate it into a not-for-profit, that it's the Canadian Tapestry and Textile Center, which is this place. And it serves other purposes than the art studio. So right now we're doing things for the community. We're working for special needs, older adult centers, and youth through weaving programs on top of fine arts, weaving, and tapestry.
I'm going to ask you, because typically I think most of my viewers weave on shaft looms and are not necessarily tapestry weavers. What would you like to tell them about tapestry?
That's a very, very good question, because when I studied floor loom in the colonial looms, it was a counterbalance loom. I loved it, and it was so fast once you set the work, of course. And it was 4-shaft loom, 2 up, 2 down, 2 up, 2 down, and then blah blah blah. And that was giving me the speed, and I was doing tapestries and tapestries and tapestries. But advantages and disadvantages of using the floor looms, because I know that there are people who like playing around with the colored warp and then having the warp exposed. Tapestry, the definition of tapestry is face webbed weaving, right? So you have the design only in the weft, not in the verticals, which is the warp. So that eliminates half of it if you're doing a floor loom, right? That you have to play vertical and horizontal. For me, it's very, very versatile because I can do whatever in the weft by controlling the design and changing the materials. It has disadvantages in the floor loom because you have to wrap it around in a beam. In my case, because I use a lot of textures in one side and not textures in the other, once you start rolling it, for those who are weavers, you would see that you have to have the tension evenly distributed, or else you're going to have like more tension in this side, less tension. So what did I do? I started stuffing it with socks, with kitchen table cloths, with scarves, like as I rolled it around to compensate the tension, if it makes sense. For those who are listening, who are weavers, they will definitely understand. It was like Christmas Day. Once you finish the beam and then you open it and everything starts coming out of the beam, all the things that, oh, there was the scarf I was looking, or the glove or something, right? But that was a funny thing that I had to deal with when I was doing with floor looms. I did many, many tapestries in the floor loom because it gave me speed. The disadvantage is that I wasn't seeing all the texture that I was putting, or it gets like very stuck in the all pressed down, especially if you're working with materials that can be wrinkled or can be just creating some kind of like a malformation, like if you're working with raffia or you're working with jute that will, once you roll it up, and then it can create some kind of memory. So for me, it didn't work. That's why, even though I have my looms, I have like 5 looms. I have floor looms also, and I have the 4-shaft loom. I still work on the wall now because of what I'm doing. My practice has taken me to just work by the wall or in the movable ones. I have some that have like wheels for presentations, but basically that was my experience with the floor looms.
Now, can you tell us how people can reach out to you? You teach, how can they sign up for courses? Where can people find you?
Well, right now I'm in Warkworth. I might be moving close to a larger community just because I teach. I still teach online and teach in person. I have my Tapestry groups. I teach online for groups. You can reach me out through my email or through my website, ixchelsuarez.com. I would be glad to answer any question. Like I said, I'm an educator. I love sharing. And for me, weaving is a way to connect. So the beauty of having the weaving reunions is that we get to see the progress of the working, my weavers that come here, they bring their looms and you can see the advance, and then we can spend 3-4 hours together weaving. You catch up and it's very, very beautiful. We talk about projects, we talk about future ideas that you can bring up to the table. It's all about expressing yourself, basically. That's what I would love everybody to understand. The importance, number one, of the arts, be music, be dance, whatever, why the arts make us more human. It doesn't matter if you take weaving or not, which I would love more to take weaving, but do something creative. It will help you be more human. There would be less wars in the world, and this is not a political message, but I do believe that the way we take care in the gym of our bodies or going to walk is the way we take care of our heart and soul, which is the sensorial part and the emotional part of being human, and that's through connecting through arts.
I hope you loved visiting that space as much as I did. I have so many links to share with you, so many interesting things. You have to visit her website, you have to visit her Instagram. There's so much. Please check the description below and check out those links. You're gonna love it. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. And if you like that one, you'll probably like this one and maybe this one. I'll meet you there. Thanks for now. Bye for now. Bye.